Good morning. Thank you for coming. I have the pleasure of hosting, which means I'm just going to bring them up and you won't see me again, okay? All right, I'm not from Nashville, but I am Southern, and you probably can pick up the Louisiana accent. I am a sales engineer here at Jamf, and I have the pleasure of introducing Nate Connect and Lucinda Forbes. Here they are, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. We're super excited to talk about from idea to implementation, the making the AI assistants knowledge skill. So you kind of saw some of it in the keynote. We're going to talk about how we got there internally. My name is Nate Connect. I'm the Director of Technical Support overseeing AMER, and I'm joined by Lucinda.
Yeah, I'm Lucinda Forbes, data scientist.
Microphone.
Yeah, you can hear me. I'm Lucinda Forbes, data scientist at Jamf.
So here's an overview of what we're going to cover. We're going to go through a lot of stuff, so I might go a little quick, but we'll have some Q&A at the end as well. So kind of do an introduction here as to the overall timeline of things. We'll talk about, I'm going to speak to the support perspective, so representing our internal support department, how we partnered with the data science team and their perspective. Lucinda's going to go into that, kind of pop the hood on things and get into some of the tech, and then we'll do a little bit of a demo at the end that'll kind of shine a little bit of light on what we're using internally and how we adapted that to what you have seen in the keynote. So really quick, here's just kind of an overall recap of the timeline. So last year at JNUC is where the data science team kind of started demoing. We had a booth set up, kind of tinkering with it to see what sort of engagement we were getting. And then, Q1 2024, we really started diving in and looking at the scoping of what we could do with this. Moving into Q2 of 2024 is we started to kind of put pen to paper and started with some behind the scenes exclusive groups and within support to test the viability and the effectiveness of what we were doing. And then, fast forward to today, and you saw it in the keynote, there's a booth up in the Expo Center. You can play with the AI assistant and really get your hands on with the tech. So this is the approach from the technical support perspective. So I'm going to talk about kind of the conceptualization of what we were trying to do, then speak to the partnership and alignment that we had to sort out between the two departments here. I'll touch on the delivery and adoption internally as we rolled it out to our teams, and then speak to the impact and iteration, the value that we saw from it, and the validation of doubling down in this area. So really, when we saw the opportunity of AI, right? AI came onto the scene. We're like, all right, this is a game changer. We have to do something with it. There were so many different ways we could approach it. We thought about business analytics, content generation for our teams, predictive case categorization, things like that. So there was this huge swath of things that we could get after. But we ultimately landed on creating a tool that would help our support team in supporting all of you. So as we thought about that, we're like, all right, we want a tool that helps our customers be successful, right? And solve issues or achieve outcomes, all that good stuff. The first decision we really presented with was, well, do we start focusing on an external tool, or do we keep this internal, or do we both at the same time? Our primary goal, we decided, was to create a tool that would make our support teams more effective, more efficient, but at the same time identified a secondary outcome that we wanted to work towards and have in the back of our minds, and that being a tool that we could put in front of our customers to enable them to self-help and not have to reach out to support, right? The best support experience is the one that doesn't happen because you can just figure it out, or the resources, the information are presented to you in a way that's easily consumable and applicable. So keeping this in mind as we move forward is super crucial, right? Scope creep is a real risk, especially with emergent technology like this. So as we were building this concept, we put in concerted effort to keep the customer at the center of everything we're doing, right? And that's a Jamf tenet, but it was really easy to get distracted with all the possibilities of what we could do with this tool. And continually in these meetings, the question we like to ask ourselves is, well, how is this good for the customer? And that was kind of our compass through all of this, our map to achieve what we knew was the right goal here. Now, In support, we believe that we're experts in understanding the customer experience. So we knew we could bring that to the table in developing this tool. But also, we don't have the resources, the knowledge, the background to build this tool within our department. So we had to partner and align with the data science team. So this meme is a little tired, right? But it's also a favorite of mine, and I think actually does a pretty good job of representing the merging of these two teams towards a common outcome, again, with the customer at the focus of it. So as we started to get our hands dirty and move from conceptualization into, all right, well, what are we going to build here? We had to put careful consideration into things like, well, what resources do we want to tap into, right? What resources do we not want to tap into? Knowledge is powerful, but knowledge can be dangerous. And we knew that we had different personas within our teams that were different skill levels, different understandings, and different backgrounds. And that also provided a good framework for the personas that we knew exist out in our customer environments, right? Different backgrounds, different skill sets, different levels of knowledge. So in addition to that, we hold ourselves in high regard when it comes to the customer experience, and we're continually reminding ourselves to keep these concepts focused on what would become a customer-facing tool. We didn't want to just build a tool that was only useful internally at Jamf. We knew that this had to move forward to a spot where we could bring it to all of you to empower you to do more, achieve outcomes, and innovate. But building this partnership and maintaining it through this journey helped us stay aligned, right? It's really easy to get distracted, so we were meeting regularly with representation from both leadership and technical support, our agents on the ground that are actually working with all of you, and validating that we were building a tool that would be useful. So kind of after honing in and defining our concept and establishing the right relationships across these departments, it was time to actually build something and see how it worked. The first proof of concept was pretty basic, right? Enter a query, the tool would respond, and additional details were included, like citing resources that it used to craft the response. And the idea here is that we could give our agents the answers that they were seeking in that immediate moment, but also enable them to dig deeper and really understand where that answer came from, right? The notion of teaching them to fish. This fit the bill for an MVP, so we passed it through senior leadership, key stakeholders, got sign off there. And with that sign off in our pocket, the next step was to unveil this to the team. So prior to this point, no one on our teams had actually seen anything tangible in terms of an AI tool. We'd been talking about this at every opportunity, kind of organically to get our support teams comfortable with the idea that something was coming here and this was a new way of working. We also knew that it would be disruptive to some degree. And talking about it before people actually saw it helped them kind of wrap their heads around it and minimize that disruption. So we ended up actually demoing it during one of our technical support quarterly all-hands meetings, right? And we've been talking about it. They kind of had this concept in their heads of like, all right, here's what it looks like. This is what's coming. This is what you're going to use to help our customers. Now, we were met with a smattering of excitement, but as well as fear, right? And understandably so, because we've all seen the headlines as AI is coming to the forefront, right? There's a certain amount of risk that comes with it when you're an individual contributor and a tool as powerful as this becomes a reality. So this kind of segues into my next topic, is the socialization of this amongst our teams. And you're probably all familiar with the change cycle, so I won't read that to you. But we also knew that this would only be impactful and successful if our teams were actually using it at every possible turn. Our leadership spent a lot of time reinforcing that this is not a tool that you should be scared of, right? And it's one thing to say it, but we're really demanding and asking a lot of trust for them, and to trust in us as leaders that this would not impact their careers or their longevity and things like that. What we really focused on, and this is a quote that I don't know how many times I've said this to my team, but the goal here is that we didn't want them to have to do more work to get more done, right? I repeated this so many times at every possible turn and really drove home that we wanted to lower the level of effort that it takes to get work done. And by way of that, organically, it increases our throughput, right? And that seemed to resonate really well. knowing that this will help scale our support function into the future, right? It's not going to replace anything. It's going to help us scale efficiently moving forward. So we also drove home that you're part of this, right? Our teams, our individual contributors, we needed them to use this. We needed their feedback. This is an image of blazing a trail. If that's not apparent, I kind of struggled with this one a little bit. But now that we had an MVP and our teams had seen it and they're, somewhat comfortable with it, we said, all right, we need to create a small group that we can actually have start using this and give us feedback on, all right, is this effective? Is it hitting the mark, right? Like they're the ones doing the work. We're creating the vision and the ideas and driving this forward, but we don't know what they know. We're not in the trenches day to day. So we actually staggered the rollout to different roles. We started with the higher, more tenured, more technical roles in our organization, and that helped us suss out the accuracy of the responses that it was giving, right? It's giving a response, it sounds good, but is it accurate? Is it usable? So we started with that level, and then we kind of moved down through the ranks and settled on our entry-level roles, because that's really where we knew this would be most powerful, right? Rather than having them have to go through years of experience to garner that information and be able to apply it, we knew this would have the most impact if our newest employees could achieve things that previously took years of experience to get to, right? Kind of this hive mind collective and allowing them to tap into that. We also made sure to bring in both skeptics and advocates, right? We wanted all perspectives as we continued to refine and develop this tool. Feedback was essential for all of this, right? And without having skeptics and advocates in there, it would be biased and we wouldn't be making good decisions moving forward. Also, we knew that if we can convert the skeptics into advocates, that we were on the right path and doing something good. So by catching all the roles in this, alpha phase, it really helped us suss out and catch the pitfalls very quickly, understand unforeseen risks, things that we hadn't thought of that our teams were brought back to us and said, this is dangerous output for someone that doesn't know what this MySQL query does, right? And again, this is all kind of in the interest of understanding all your personas out there and understanding what information is usable and what information is dangerous and how to apply that effectively. Ultimately, we tailored responses and the sources that were being cited there to be most useful across varying levels of technical and product knowledge. So we continue to expand the alpha over time, right? We added more people to this group incrementally until we reached a point where every person in technical support at Jamf had access to this. And at this point, it was a matter of just continually reinforcing that this is the new way of working. But frankly, the adoption didn't take off like we had hoped. There were two main methods that we were using to help drive adoption. The first was reinforcement via the tenured agents, right? The people in our team that the new hires or other roles look to for guidance and look to for behaviors and actions to follow. So we encourage them to use this to answer questions, right? Whenever, a case gets escalated to the next tier, things like that, and someone would tell me, well, they should have known this. I said, well, send them the tool and have them actually run that question by this tool. Teach them a new way of working and help us reinforce these behaviors. The second method that we used that was actually super effective was more hands-on workshopping with smaller groups in team meetings. We sent our program manager to every team. He'd been helping us spearhead this as well, so he's very involved. But we sent him to each team meeting, and he just kind of showed up to answer questions. And it was great to have another level of representation that wasn't leadership, right? So that there was more, a more genuine response to these questions. And he was able to even get more anecdotal feedback via these workshops. And after he went around to all these team meetings, everyone was bought in, and they started using this in their day-to-day. So I gathered a couple quotes for our team here. Now, I will qualify, it says Ask Jamf because up to this point, internally, we were calling this tool Ask Jamf. Now we're calling it AI Assistant Knowledge Skill, so that's why it says Ask Jamf here. But the two favorite quotes that I got from our teams were, Ask Jamf has gotten me through some very difficult cases and interactions. It's a great tool to get quick responses and to learn valuable lessons and troubleshooting steps on topics that may be unfamiliar with. An absolute game changer and valuable tool to add to technical support's troubleshooting tool belt. And Ask Jamf is great because it searches cases and documentation. It makes finding them faster, so I get to solutions quicker and make more time to meet with my customers, right? And that is another thing that we're really seeing an impact here. Our teams are spending less time sifting through information to find that piece that connects the dots to get to the outcome. This is allowing them to spend more time on the phone or on Zooms and actually interacting as humans with you rather than digging through cases or documentation and all that. So it's helping us elevate the experience we deliver in supporting all of you. So the beta version that we rolled out was rebuilt off the feedback that our teams provided, right? And I can't stress how important and valuable the feedback was from our teams, right? We can sit in a closed room and create all these ideas and build all these things, but we really needed to know that it was useful for our teams. There will be continued work for the foreseeable future. I just asked David the other day, now that this is out, you saw in the keynote, it's gonna be part of the product. Are we gonna get any attention here? We will. So we're gonna continue using the methods that we've used here to build this initial version to refine it and test things out internally where the risk is much lower. So some of the things that we have been working on and will continue to work on are refining responses for directing to resources, right? So like, here's your answer, but here's where you can find more about this. It's one thing to have the piece of information you need today. It's another thing to have an understanding of why that was the answer and how to apply it. Finding new sources of information and data to tap into. And then internally, we're looking at using it for things like predictive case categorization, right? Parsing that case that's submitted and saying, this is this product, this feature, and this niche topic, right? So we can more accurately route our cases to the people that are most appropriate to work on them at that time. And really, the other thing that we want to do here as soon as possible is suggested first steps. When a case comes in and lands with an agent, we'd love to have it output, hey, based on what's here, this is the path I think you should go down and the place that you should start. So that kind of summarizes and wraps up my perspective. Our perspective from support is how we, collaborated, built this tool, what that you saw demoed in the keynote. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to Lucinda to pop the hood and talk about some of the tech.
Thanks, Nate. So I'm now going to talk through the making of the AI assistance knowledge skill from the data science perspective. I'll start by explaining what RAG is, then I'll go into some detail on the Jamf data sources and how we prepared the data so that it can be used by the AI assistant. I'll also explain our retrieval workflow and the techniques that we use to improve it, all guided by feedback from support. The knowledge skill utilises RAG, which stands for retrieval-augmented generation. RAG is an approach that enhances large language model answer generation, and this is achieved by supplementing the trained knowledge with data that has been retrieved from an external source. This allows us to feed previously trained language models with Jamf data to help answer Jamf-related questions. LLMs are limited to the data that they're trained on, and this can contain information that is incorrect or out of date. Therefore, grounding responses in relevant, domain-specific and factual information can vastly improve the accuracy and the reliability of the generated answers. This diagram shows how RAG works. When a user asks a question, relevant data is retrieved from an external knowledge source. The prompt is then augmented with the retrieved data, and this is used to answer the question. Here's an example of a simple RAG prompt. The LLM is given a role and instructions on how to answer the question. The retrieved documents and input question are then appended at the end. More points can also be added to improve the prompt, such as instructing the LLM to respond with, I don't know the answer, if it can't find the answer in the retrieved documents. You can also add specific instructions for the required audience level that you want the answer to be tailored to, or even give instructions on the types of questions that it shouldn't answer to make sure that it stays on task. So all of this is really to reduce the risk of hallucinations and the risk of getting completely incorrect answers. Now moving on to our data. The first stage of building the RAG app was scoping the Jamf data sources. There are two main types of data: previously solved problems and Jamf documentation. The previously solved problems include curated resolved support cases, known product issues, and verified community posts. These typically include a description of the problem, along with a detailed solution or workaround for each issue, and the Jamf documentation pages from are from the Jamf Learning Hub and the knowledge base articles. They contain user guides, technical articles, release notes, and training material. To allow the data to be retrieved so that it can be used in a RAG application, it must be processed and stored in a vector database. And this diagram shows how we did that. For the previously solved problems, we started by selecting the issues that would be useful for solving future problems. Then we created text documents by combining the problem descriptions with their solutions and workarounds. Following this, we anonymized the data using various NLP techniques to ensure that any identifying information was redacted. And then the documents were transformed into vector representations using an embeddings model. These were then stored in our vector database along with document metadata. For the documentation sources, we extracted page HTML using APIs and then parsed it to extract the required data. We then split the pages up into smaller sections so that they could be effectively stored in our database. The documents were split carefully to maintain the page structure and to ensure that the context wasn't lost. And this data was also transformed into embeddings using the embeddings model and then stored in the database. Once the documents are stored, they can be retrieved using a similarity search, and this diagram shows how that works. Embeddings models transform data into embeddings by encoding the semantic meaning of the text, and embeddings are fixed-length vectors, which are numerical representations that models can understand. So when a question is asked, text is converted into embeddings using the same embeddings model that was used for the documents. Then the similarity between the question and the documents in the vector database can be measured using a simple vector distance calculation. The most relevant documents, that's the ones with the highest similarity scores, can then be selected. To keep the data up to date, we've built a data pipeline that automatically refreshes the data every day. This involves extracting document metadata from the sources and then comparing it to the documents that have already been saved. Then we check if there are any new documents or if any have been updated. And if there are any changes, new embeddings are generated and these are saved to the database. Once we had the data properly processed, we created a Slack app to get the chatbot to support so that they could start testing and we could get some feedback. Obviously, support are the experts, so we really needed and valued their opinions. This diagram shows the workflow of the alpha version. When a question is asked, the first stage is retrieval. Documents are retrieved from every source. These are then combined and ranked in order of similarity using the scores from the initial vector retrieval. The documents with the highest similarity scores overall are then used to generate the answer. This slide shows an example of how that alpha version works. So when a question is asked, 5 documents are retrieved from each source, and then they're simply ranked by the similarity scores. The 5 with the highest scores overall are then used to generate the answer. Due to the differences between the embeddings data across the sources, we found that some of the sources were favored over others, even though they didn't always have the best documents to answer the questions. And another issue that became apparent from the support feedback is that even when questions have no relevant documents in the database, 5 documents would still be returned regardless. So from this, it was clear to see that we had to find a better way to combine the results from the various sources and to ensure that the documents returned are definitely relevant to the question. So to improve on the previous approach, we developed a multi-stage retrieval system, and this was released as the beta version. The workflow is shown in this diagram. The first stage is the query router, which uses an LLM to determine which data sources are best suited to answer the question. The query router is useful for questions when there's an obvious data source that's required, like when a question is about a specific documentation page or a specific product issue. In these cases, there's no need to search every source. The documents are then retrieved from only those sources. We then re-rank the documents using a re-ranking model. This provides a more accurate ranking order as it uses a language model that is specifically trained in the task of re-ranking documents from existing search results. Although the initial vector store retrieval is very fast and effective at retrieving the most relevant documents, the ranking order is not always perfect, and this means that useful documents can be discarded if they're further down in the ranking order. The reason for this is that information is lost when text is compressed into vectors. The final stage is an LLM-based relevance filter, and this determines whether each document is actually useful enough to help answer the question. It also returns the reasoning for why each document is selected, and this is included to help with the answer generation. The combination of the re-ranking model and the relevance filter ensures that only the most contextually relevant documents are used in the answer generation. Testing feedback from the Jamf support agents confirmed that the improvements that we made resulted in significantly better answers, and this highlights how valuable the cross-team collaboration was. This diagram shows an example of how the multi-stage retriever works. When the question is asked, the query router selects the relevant data sources. In this case, it's the product docs and the knowledge bases. And then the documents are retrieved from only these sources. The re-ranking model then reorders the results, and the relevance filter determines which documents are sent to the answer generation. Finally, the answer is generated using only the most relevant documents, and the answer is returned. While we want to ensure that relevant documents are used in answer generation, we also sometimes need to limit the number of documents used. This is necessary even when using LLMs with very large context windows. And this is because LLMs typically focus on information at the start or the very end of long contexts, and information in the middle can be overlooked. Therefore, sending a large number of documents can have a really negative impact on answers. To overcome this, we set a minimum relevance score cutoff and also a maximum number of documents that can be included as a limit. This helps to ensure that responses are cohesive and useful, as including too many partially relevant documents can really detract from that. This is an example of a question being asked using the Ask Jamf Slack app. If you were to ask, how do I renew the VPP token in Jamf Pro? This is the answer it would return. You can see here it cited some sources. There's a visual guide which has a video walkthrough of how to renew the token. There was also instructions from a page on the Learning Hub, and also a knowledge base article with some instructions. And you can see here, this is where it got the link to the visual guide video. If we look back at the answer generation, you can see down at the bottom, there is a feedback button, and it opens the feedback form. That's how we collected feedback during testing. So while the Jamf support agents were testing the RAG model with the Slack app, the newly formed Jamf AI team have been building the AI assistant. Ask Jamf has now been integrated into the AI assistant as its knowledge skill. The knowledge skill is one of many tools that can use to answer questions and action user requests, as I'm sure you saw in the keynote. And this is how the RAG app will be accessed both internally to support and also to you in the external version when it's released. If you want to know more about the AI assistant and its other skills, you should attend the AI and data science talk tomorrow with David Price-Compson, who's here today, and Matt Benio. Now let's show you the AI assistant answering some questions using its knowledge skill. The example question here is, how do I deploy custom configuration profiles? The assistant lets us know that it's looking for data in our knowledge base. And here's the answer. So it includes two possible approaches. Also important considerations, and also some information regarding smart groups. Now, if we're to ask it a follow-up question, can you tell me more about the built-in certificate authority? It goes back to retrieve more information from our knowledge base. And then it returns the answer. So the current plan is for the customer beta to be available before the end of the year, and this will be available through Jamf account. In the meantime, please come and join us at the AI demo booth in Expo Hall, and you can try it for yourself and also sign up for the beta. Here are also the details for David and Matt's talk tomorrow, and here you can find out more about the AI assistant and also some of the other AI and data science initiatives at Jamf. That's everything from me. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Nate?
No, thanks for being here, and thanks for I don't know, being an awesome customer environment for us to work with. But we have 12 minutes left here for Q&A. So any questions? Hold on one sec. We got a mic for you.
You showed in the keynote too, it actually performing tasks. I remember it was creating smart groups and actually doing some administrative duties. Can you talk a little more about how that's implemented when it's actually doing stuff for you?
Take it away, Lucinda.
This might be one for David, actually. I think this is more of some of the other skills that it actually uses.
Okay, I'll try. Yeah, what you saw in the keynote, which was working within a Jamf Pro test instance, won't be available as part of the beta. But yeah, it's able to leverage many of the APIs that we already offer to you as customers. Of course, not only the ones that are mainly read-only or safely actionable. Yeah, but we definitely try to make sure that we would only release those slowly and with thought. So the first few that are very obvious are the smart groups, configuration profiles, like things that would really be repeatable and sort of boring for you guys to do. But that wouldn't be released until early 2025. So that's the sort of plan for those actions. Does that answer your question? Perfect, no worries. Any other questions?
Well, once AI is implemented, is there a way to limit based on role for access?
So that was one of our major concerns at the beginning here, right? Like returning MySQL queries, select statement is one thing, but actually manipulating a database, there's a certain level of knowledge and responsibility that comes with executing on that. We've known that for a long time in technical support, right? And via enablement and training, we've been able to gatekeep some of that information. Now, with essentially giving the larger team access to the hive mind and all the knowledge, like I said, it could be very dangerous. So that's one thing that we're working on internally right now is to build out different roles and personas and basically tailor the responses based on what we know those roles and agents are capable of or are low risk for that. So that's what we're working on internally.
Again, this might be one that's more for David, but...
Sure, okay. Initially, when it gets released as the beta, you'll only have access to it in Jamf account. And that means that the org admin will have the ability to turn it on or off for all other IT admins. And they'll have that by default. It'll be turned off by default, so you don't have to worry too much about any of your CIS or ISA sort of risks there. But it's only on the IT admin level. So that will be the starting base. What Nate's talking about there with different roles, eventually we will get to that state where we can build specific prompts that are catered to certain roles. So then it's like helping them really specifically in their tasks.
we create a role for like our service desk team, so they have access to like look at unlock codes and see what's going on with the device or where it's stuck, but they don't have full access to like eliminate pending commands or push any make any advanced searches or config profiles, and otherwise they could literally create anything and then we'd have an issue.
Yeah, we would just inherit the same things through. We have enough APIs on our side to know what each role has access to, so we would inherit that through that.
Good question.
I just wanted to understand. I know that right now it's just distributed to a certain group. You have the beta program, but would this also be available in your live sandbox environment? Because I know for Jamf Pro, Protect, and all of that, you have that live demo available, which we can actually, as a product manager, I'm more interested to, have access to the live sandbox, to showcase to my customers rather than the production environment.
I'll take that again. Yeah, I think you asked this yesterday, but I'll answer it for everyone. Right now, we're not giving access to the what you saw in the keynote. Obviously, that's still sort of in development. But as I said earlier, the plan is to have to go through this Jamf account beta, where anyone who signs up for it will have access to it. We would then go straight to a GA as well. So then every customer could have the chance to turn it on and off in their Jamf account. The in-portal use of the assistant, as I said already, planned for early 2025. But anyone who's in the beta who reaches out and says, "Can I just give it a go?" I'm sure we could find a way to sort of connect up the dots and give you an access to something, because by then we'll have a lot of the stuff in place. So I'd say keep in contact and we can work on something.
And one thing which I find very exciting here is, as mentioned in the keynote, it's not about just giving the information, but it's also about executing a lot of tasks. Like, so when it comes to, so that's where I had this clarification. When it just comes to about asking questions, the Ask Jamf part, like, how do I get to do this, or what is the process for executing this particular task, and so on and so forth. We have the other chatbots, Microsoft Copilot and all of that, which is, fetching information from the available documents, which is already there as part of the enterprise. So how do we differentiate here when it comes to, like, if the customer is saying, why should I, purchase additionally when it comes to Ask Jamf, because we already have a native chatbot here, or I have a Microsoft Copilot here, because I'm using Microsoft Copilot and it fetches for me all what I ask for from the available documents that's there.
So this has access to all of the up-to-date Jamf data that wouldn't be available elsewhere. We update it every day, so it's totally up to date, and it's stuff that wouldn't be necessarily publicly available too. David, do you have anything else to add?
Perfect.
I say you could use ChatGPT to ask questions about Jamf products, and it'll scrape the documentation that's out there externally available. Our tool has a different set of data that it's pulling from, so you get more robust and more accurate and up-to-date answers.
Yeah, and some of that stuff from the other models would be, months, sometimes even longer out of date, whereas ours would be up to date.
This is going to be a nightmare question for any IT admin, but I got my InfoSec hat on right now. When it comes to resolve cases and specific cases, does it look through all various companies, and does it have certain information redacted, or how does that work? Because they're going to ask.
Yeah, so we anonymize all identifying information from the support cases, so it just gets to the point where it's just a problem and the workaround, and any kind of identifying information is fully anonymized. We've got a whole host of NLP techniques, and yeah. David, anything else?
Sweet. I will take off my InfoSec hat then. Gladly become an admin again.
Good question. That's why we brought him too. We knew that was going to come up.
Thanks. So it looks like the Learning Hub, documentation, and other Jamf-made sources are the primary ones, but have you looked into, or did you consider adding Apple publicly facing documentation into the model. For example, Jamf usually kind of just refers directly to Apple documentation rather than redocument, mostly like the MDM spec and things like that.
We have got some at the moment, but it's not very much. I think that, I'm not sure if that was one of the major requirements, but I think that it's something that we could look into if it was became a requirement.
It's definitely on the radar because, frankly, a lot of the things our teams work with in Jamf support aren't Jamf products. It's the integrations and the other technologies that are working with Jamf in your ecosystem. So we have a strong desire to bridge those gaps as well. We're really impressed with what the impact just tapping into these data sources that we built had with our teams. So we're super excited to see how much further we can take it as we expand that catalog that's able to reference.
I'll add one thing. So because it uses the support cases where you're right, a lot of the staff will use Apple Docs as reference. The power of the LLM is it will pull out the link and still regurgitate that back to the user. So by secondary effect, you get the Apple Docs that are most relevant, and we don't have to worry about having them in our data store, which would be sort of supplementary. Any other questions? Oh, you could have sat near that guy.
I know I should have. I'm sorry. Will you guys be utilizing a lot of the questions that are being asked for future products as well? So, for example, if something's asked but it's not in Jamf at the time, and then you see enough requests of something coming up, will that be a potential gateway?
At least internally, absolutely. Katie and her product team, we are continually trying to find ways to take the data and the things we know in technical support and bring them back to the product team to say, hey, this is a blind spot, right? Or this is a pain point or an area that's difficult to navigate, and use that information, insight, and experience to continually improve our products and make things easier. So you don't have to ask questions or use automation. It just bridges those gaps.
I'll add one quick thing as well. I literally had Molly Mosley come to me yesterday and say, are we storing all their questions and answers? And I was like, yes, just to help it be better. She was like, no, I want to know what products, things they want that they're not getting from us. So yeah, Nate's absolutely right. We would use that to make your sort of experience better.
Most of these chatbots, there is a percentage of hallucination. So I'd like to understand for the Jamf chatbot, like what is the percentage of hallucination, or is it that something which the accuracy is it's greater than 90%?
I think this is something that would probably be more handled in the actual AI assistant itself, but I think from what we've seen, there isn't really any hallucination because it has all the documentation sources available. And we do say, if it doesn't know the answer, say it doesn't know the answer. Don't try and, make it up. David, do you have anything to add?
No.
So is this only about fetching the documents from which is already there, existing in the enterprise, or does it also fetch from externally?
Sorry, what was the last word?
Or does this also fetch external? Is it only about accessing the internal documents which is already there in the enterprise, or does that fetch internal?
Yeah, so the knowledge skill itself only specifically would retrieve documents from our database that has the Jamf data in it. I'm not sure if the assistant would then go elsewhere. That's probably one for David. No, not.
Okay, so right now it's just internal alone.
Currently, it's only referencing things internally within our ecosystem at Jamf for the internal tool. But there's lots of conversations to be had about, again, there's so many integrations and external technologies that don't exist in our resources that we have created or curated. But that's another bridge that we need to cross and figure out how to solve for that.
I think that's time. So, yeah.
We're up in the Expo Center if you want to talk more, so come talk to us. Thank you.
Thanks very much.